The empty water bottle rolls once across the passenger floor, taps the door, and stops. Outside, Death Valley Road burns under a high noon sun so bright it feels almost white. The solo traveler turns the key again. Nothing. Just that small metallic click from the ignition, sharp and useless, repeating like a verdict. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They think panic arrives screaming. Sometimes it arrives quietly, as a thought that says, move now, do anything, escape this feeling. But in extreme heat, the first enemy is not the desert. It is the mind-breaking command before the body has a plan. What do you become when no one can hear you, no signal can save you, and fear starts giving orders? This is where samurai discipline begins, not by pretending the chaos is gone, but by learning how to stand correctly inside it. A solo traveler looks different in a brochure than he does on the side of Death Valley Road. In the brochure, he is freedom. Sunglasses. Open highway. A quiet car moving through a landscape too large to explain. No meetings. No noise. No one asking where he is, what he is doing, when he will be back. But now the engine is dead. Now the road does not feel like freedom. It feels like distance. The mountains do not look beautiful. They look indifferent. The sun is not a postcard sun. It is straight overhead, pressing down on the roof, turning the windshield into a bright sheet of heat. The steering wheel is too hot to hold for long. The air inside the car is thick, stale, and wrong. He turns the key again. Click. A small sound. Almost pathetic. Not loud enough to match the size of the problem. He turns it again. Click. That sound becomes the whole world. Not the desert. Not the sky. Not even the empty water bottle lying on the floor. Just the metallic click of a machine refusing to obey, repeated by a hand that has not yet accepted reality. This is how pressure breaks people. Not all at once. Not with dramatic music. It starts with a tiny gap between what the mind demands and what the world allows. The mind says, start. The engine says, no. The mind says, try again. The engine says, no. The mind says, this cannot be happening. The desert says nothing. And inside that silence, despair begins to offer its first instruction. Move. Not think. Not assess. Not breathe. Just move. Get out. Start walking. Outrun the feeling. Do something large enough to make the helplessness stop. That is the shadow in this moment. Not weakness in the ordinary sense. Not cowardice. The shadow is the mind's impulse to escape discomfort so violently that it begins to confuse motion with survival. The traveler does not want to make a bad decision. He wants relief. He wants the pressure in his chest to loosen. He wants the terrible stillness to end. But the desert does not reward panic with mercy. In ordinary life, panic can disguise itself as productivity. You send the message too fast. You leave the room too soon. You snap at someone because silence feels unbearable. You make a decision just to stop the tension of not knowing. People call it action. Sometimes they even call it courage. On Death Valley Road at high noon, the disguise falls off. Here, motion without command becomes danger. Here, the body can mistake urgency for wisdom. Here, the mind can be so desperate to feel less trapped that it tries to trade one kind of fear for another. The solo traveler grips the key until the ridges mark his fingers. He looks at the phone again. No signal. He lifts it higher, as if a few inches could change the laws of distance. Nothing. He looks down the road one way, then the other. The asphalt wavers in the heat. No headlights. No dust plume. No voice. No help arriving inside the next breath. The empty water bottle is still on the floor. A simple object. Plastic. Light. Useless now. But it tells the truth without emotion. It says the situation has changed. It says the body has limits. It says the fantasy of being in control has ended. Most people hate that moment. Not because they are stupid. Because the human nervous system was built to protect us, and sometimes protection feels like alarm. The chest tightens. The jaw locks. The eyes search too quickly. The breath climbs high and shallow. The hand keeps reaching for the same solution, turning the key, tapping the phone, checking the mirror, trying to force the world back into the shape it had 10 minutes ago. This is where dignity is usually lost. Not because the person is bad, but because the person has surrendered command to the loudest feeling in the room. Fudoshin does not mean the traveler feels nothing. That would be fantasy. A person alone in that heat, with a failed engine and no signal, should feel fear. Fear is information. Fear says, pay attention. Fear says, this matters. Fear says, stop being casual. But fear is not qualified to lead. Fear is a messenger with shaking hands. It can knock on the door. It can warn the house. It cannot be given the keys. The confrontation is not between the traveler and the desert alone. It is between the traveler and the first version of himself that appears under pressure. One version wants to slam the door, curse the car, keep twisting the ignition until the battery is spent and the mind is even more broken. One version wants to step into the glare and turn distance into a gamble. One version wants to collapse into the thought that nobody is coming, that the mistake has already become a sentence. But there is another version. It is quieter. At first, it may feel weaker because it does not shout. It does not promise rescue. It does not create a movie scene. It does not pretend the heat is harmless or that fear is shameful. It simply says, take command of the next minute. That is the discipline lens of this moment. Emotion is not destroyed. It is placed under command. The traveler does not need to become fearless. He needs to become orderly while afraid. There is a difference. A panicked man asks, how do I get out of this feeling? A disciplined man asks, what is the next safe priority? That question changes the body. Not magically. Not instantly. But enough. The hand stops turning the key for a moment. The eyes stop scanning the horizon like a trapped animal. The shoulders drop half an inch. The breath becomes something he can hear. The empty bottle is no longer just proof of failure. It becomes a signal, stop pretending this is normal. Stop spending energy on denial. Respect the facts. The outside scene has not improved. The engine is still dead. The phone still has no signal. The sun is still high, brutal, and unmoved. But inside the car, one thing has changed. The traveler is no longer obeying every command despair gives him. That is where calm begins. Not as comfort. As structure. The modern world trains people to believe calm is a mood. Something you have when circumstances are gentle, when the air conditioning works, when the meeting goes well, when the money clears, when the traffic opens, when the text comes back, when the doctor calls with good news. But real calm is not a gift from easy conditions. Real calm is a position you take under hard conditions. It is the decision to stop making the emergency larger with your own reaction. It is the refusal to let the mind sprint ahead into disaster while the body is still sitting in the driver's seat. It is the humility to admit, I do not control the desert, the signal, the engine, or the next car that may come down this road. But I can control whether I waste myself in the first 5 minutes. That is not small. In a crisis, the first 5 minutes can become the doorway into everything that follows. Not because every problem gets solved there, but because identity gets chosen there. The traveler learns who is driving now, fear, or command. He looks again at the empty water bottle. Earlier, it was an afterthought, something tossed aside between miles. Now it is a mirror. It reflects the cost of moving through life half-aware, trusting comfort too much, assuming the world will remain convenient because it has been convenient so far. But samurai discipline does not use that mirror for shame. Shame wastes energy. Shame tells the traveler he is stupid, doomed, alone, already defeated. Command says something cleaner, this is the fact. Respect it. Now choose the next right action. That distinction matters. Because despair is not defeated by arguing with it. Despair is weakened when the body is given a task, the mind is given a boundary, and the moment is made smaller than the fear. The traveler does not need to solve the entire desert. He needs to stop feeding panic. He needs to stop repeating the same useless motion. He needs to stop treating the feeling of urgency as if it were an order from a superior officer. The ignition clicks one more time in his memory, even after his hand leaves the key. Click. That sound can become a sentence, or it can become a bell. A sentence says, you are trapped. A bell says, wake up. And at high noon on Death Valley Road, with the empty bottle on the floor and heat pressing against the glass, the difference between those two meanings is the beginning of Fudoshin. Discipline does not begin after you feel calm. It begins in the first second you realize you are about to lose command. The solo traveler does not become disciplined by suddenly feeling brave. He becomes disciplined when his hand stops reaching for the ignition. That is the first training. Not the heroic choice. Not the dramatic one. The quiet one. The choice to stop repeating emotion that has already given its answer. His fingers loosen from the key. The metallic click still echoes in his head, but he does not feed it again. He lets the silence arrive. He lets the engine stay dead without arguing with it for one more second. This is harder than it sounds. A frightened mind hates stillness because stillness feels like surrender. It wants noise. It wants movement. It wants the door flung open, shoes hitting asphalt, eyes fixed on the horizon, the body chasing the illusion of control. But Fudoshin begins with a command so plain that the ego almost rejects it. Stop. Not forever. Not as defeat. Stop long enough to return to yourself. He places both hands flat on his thighs. He feels the fabric of his pants, the heat trapped in the seat, the sweat at the base of his palms. He says nothing out loud. He does not need a speech. He only needs to mark the truth inside his own mind. Fear is here. Despair is speaking. Running is an impulse, not an order. That is the second training. Name the force before it becomes your commander. When a thought stays unnamed, it can wear the mask of wisdom. It can say, this is survival. It can say, this is the only way. It can say, move now or you are finished. But when the traveler names it clearly, the thought loses some of its authority. It is not command. It is panic asking to drive. The empty water bottle rests near his right shoe. He looks at it again, not with shame this time, but with attention. A few minutes ago, it was proof that he had failed to prepare well enough. Now it becomes the anchor that brings the entire situation back into proportion. Empty bottle. Dead engine. No signal. High noon. Extreme heat. One person. One car. One next decision. That is the third training. Make the battlefield smaller. The undisciplined mind tries to solve everything at once. How long will I be here? Why did this happen? What if no one comes? How far is the next town? What if I made a terrible mistake? What if this road stays empty? Those questions may feel important, but under pressure, too many questions become a swarm. They eat breath. They scatter attention. They turn the mind into a room with every alarm going off at once. So he shrinks the battle. Not the whole desert. This car. Not the whole day. This minute. Not every possible outcome. The next safe priority. He does not have to become a survival expert in a single breath. He has to stop making the situation worse. He has to conserve the body, protect his attention, and choose actions that belong to reality rather than fear. He checks the shade inside the car. He checks what can be used to reduce direct sun. He checks the phone without worshipping it. No signal is information, not an insult. He checks the road with patience, not desperation. He looks for signs of traffic, landmarks, anything that can help him understand where he is without turning uncertainty into a story of doom. Then he returns to the bottle. The bottle is empty, and that matters. But it is also steady. It is not panicking. It is not making predictions. It is simply telling the truth. The body needs limits respected. The mind needs the same thing. This is the fourth training. Anchor the body before commanding the mind. He lowers his shoulders. He breathes through his nose as much as the heat allows. Not beautifully. Not like a meditation app. More like a man remembering that breath is a tool he still owns. He counts one inhale. One exhale. Then another. He presses his feet into the floorboard and feels the solid shape beneath him. The desert is vast, but his feet are here. The sun is brutal, but his hands are here. The future is unclear, but this breath is here. That is not poetry. That is control returning through the body. A mind in fear will not obey philosophy for long. It needs something physical. It needs a hand against the steering wheel for only a second, then away from the heat. It needs the sensation of the seat under the legs. It needs the eyes choosing one fixed point instead of darting across the windshield. It needs the mouth closed before it curses away more energy. It needs the jaw unclenched because the jaw often becomes the first place where panic builds a fist. The traveler begins a ritual. He looks at the empty water bottle. He takes one controlled breath. He scans the road. He checks the phone once. He returns the phone to the same place. He does not check it every 3 seconds like a man begging the universe to change its mind. He creates order because the world has stopped providing it. This is the fifth training. Turn discipline into ritual before fear turns into behavior. A ritual does not have to be grand. In this car, under this sun, ritual is simple. Stop. Name. Breathe. Assess. Choose. Repeat. The order matters because repetition gives the mind a path. Without a path, fear runs wherever it wants. It runs into memory. It runs into regret. It runs into imagined disaster. It runs down the road in the heat and calls that decision strength. But ritual keeps bringing the traveler back. Stop. Name. Breathe. Assess. Choose. Repeat. He does not let the metallic click become the rhythm anymore. That sound belonged to the machine. Now he creates a new rhythm that belongs to command. He speaks inwardly with discipline, not cruelty. Do not run from the feeling. Do not spend energy proving this is unfair. Do not keep turning the key just to hear failure again. Protect the body. Protect attention. Choose the next safe action. There is no hatred in this voice. No insult. No fake toughness. Samurai discipline is not the voice that calls you weak when you are afraid. It is the voice that refuses to let fear waste what you still have. And what does he still have? He has shade, even imperfect shade. He has the car as a marker and shelter. He has a road where another person may eventually pass. He has breath. He has judgment, if he stops feeding panic. He has the ability to wait without collapsing into despair. That last one is not passive. Waiting under command is an action. It is one of the hardest actions modern people ever practice, because almost everything in modern life teaches escape. Tap the screen. Refresh the page. Send another message. Buy something. Scroll something. Say something. Leave something. Move just to stop feeling the weight of staying. But in the desert, the old habit is exposed. Not every feeling deserves movement. Not every urgent thought deserves obedience. The traveler watches the heat shimmer over the asphalt. He does not romanticize it. He does not pretend this is a lesson he wanted. He does not turn hardship into a performance. He simply trains inside what is real. The empty water bottle catches a blade of sunlight and glints for half a second. Earlier, it was evidence of carelessness. Now it is a small bell of attention. It reminds him that life has narrowed, and because life has narrowed, his discipline must become exact. No wasted motion. No dramatic despair. No obedience to the impulse to run. Only the next right act, done cleanly. The engine is still dead. The phone is still silent. The sun is still high. But the traveler is no longer clicking the key like a prayer to panic. He is sitting inside the heat with the mind returning to command. And that is the beginning of survival as discipline, not conquering the desert, not defeating fear, but refusing to let the worst thought in the hottest moment become the one that leads. The first change is not visible from the road. No helicopter appears over the ridge. No bar of signal returns to the phone. No engine suddenly catches and roars back to life like the desert has decided to forgive him. The outside world stays hard. Death Valley Road still stretches in both directions, pale and wavering. The sun is still nailed to the center of the sky. Heat presses against the glass with the patience of something ancient. The car still holds that dead mechanical silence, the kind that makes every small sound seem larger than it is. But inside the traveler, the rhythm has changed. The metallic click is no longer running the scene. It is still there in memory, sharp and humiliating, but it has lost its throne. He does not keep returning to it like a man touching a wound to prove it hurts. His hand rests away from the key now. His breathing is not perfect, but it has weight. His eyes still scan the road, but they are no longer begging the horizon to become a miracle. He looks at the empty water bottle again. In the beginning, it was accusation. A piece of plastic on the floor saying, "You failed, you forgot, you were careless, and now the desert knows." Then it became information. A hard fact. A limit. A small object that forced the mind to stop negotiating with reality. Now it becomes something else. A boundary. It tells him where fantasy ends and discipline begins. Because transformation under pressure is rarely the dramatic thing people imagine. It is not the sudden arrival of confidence. It is not the disappearance of fear. It is not a man in danger becoming a different man, clean and fearless, as if character were a costume he could put on when the situation became severe enough. Real transformation is smaller and more honest. It is the moment he notices fear giving an order and does not obey it. It is the moment he feels the old impulse rise again, get out, move, escape the feeling, and he lets it pass through him without turning it into action. It is the moment his pride stops demanding a heroic scene. There is a strange humility in that. The desert is too large for ego. It does not care how independent he thought he was that morning. It does not care how many miles he planned to cover, how good the playlist sounded, how free the open road made him feel before the engine failed. Out here, the world strips away performance. It leaves a person with the few things that matter: breath, judgment, attention, restraint. And restraint is not weakness. Restraint is power refusing to become reckless. The traveler begins to understand that calm is not a soft thing. Calm has edges. Calm says no to the hand when the hand wants to keep twisting the key. Calm says no to the legs when the legs want to turn panic into motion. Calm says no to the imagination when it tries to drag the mind into every terrible possibility at once. Calm does not make the desert safe. It makes the traveler usable. That is the difference. A panicked person becomes unavailable to reality. He is sitting in the car, but his mind is miles away, sprinting through outcomes, fighting ghosts, arguing with the past, inventing futures he cannot verify. A disciplined person stays close enough to the moment to serve it. The traveler listens. Not for rescue in a childish way. Not with the desperate expectation that the next second must save him. He listens because attention is now his duty. The faint movement of air against the car. The small settling sounds of heated metal. The far-off emptiness of the road. His own breath, lower than before. He watches. Not wildly. Not with the eyes of an animal trapped inside its own fear. He watches with a narrowed task: receive what is true. No more, no less. The scene has become the opposite of the intro. Before, the ignition click commanded him. Now silence does. Before, the empty bottle accused him. Now it instructs him. Before, the high noon sun made him feel hunted. Now it reminds him that his energy must be guarded, not thrown away in protest. Nothing sentimental has happened. He is still alone. The engine is still dead. The phone still refuses to become a lifeline. The problem has not softened itself for his comfort. But the man inside the problem has stopped breaking apart. This is the modern meaning of Fudoshin. It is not a warrior fantasy. It is not standing in a desert pretending heat cannot hurt you. It is not turning suffering into a stage where the ego performs toughness for an invisible crowd. It is the discipline of remaining trustworthy when the situation becomes hostile. Trustworthy to your own body. Trustworthy to the facts. Trustworthy to the next right action. The traveler's shoulders drop again. Not much. Half an inch. Maybe less. But in that half inch is a whole philosophy. The body has stopped preparing to flee from the feeling itself. The mind has stopped treating despair as prophecy. He can be afraid and still be orderly. He can be alone and still be responsible. He can be in danger and still refuse to make fear the driver. That is the transformation. Not rescue. Command. The empty water bottle shifts slightly as his foot moves near it. A dry sound against the floor mat. Earlier, that sound might have sent another wave of shame through him. Now it simply brings him back. Here. This car. This road. This breath. This next decision. The desert has forced his world into brutal simplicity, and strangely, that simplicity becomes clean. There is no room for drama. No room for self-pity. No room for the false comfort of imagining every mistake that led here. Regret can wait. Blame can wait. The only thing allowed in the front seat now is command. And command is quiet. It does not shout slogans. It does not promise that everything will be fine. It does not insult fear for showing up. It simply keeps arranging the inner room so the traveler can still act like a person with dignity. This is why calm matters most when calm feels least available. Anyone can appear steady in comfort. Anyone can talk about discipline under air conditioning, with cold water nearby, with a charged phone, with a working engine and a road that feels like freedom. But the test comes when comfort disappears and the mind starts looking for a substitute. Some people use anger. Some use denial. Some use frantic motion. Some use despair. The disciplined person learns to use attention. Attention becomes the blade. Not against the desert. Against confusion. Against the impulse to obey the loudest thought. Against the pride that would rather do something foolish than sit still and feel powerless for one more minute. The sun does not move quickly. The road does not fill with traffic on command. The car does not apologize. Still, the traveler remains. Not frozen. Not defeated. Present. The empty bottle lies near his shoe like a small, hard teacher. It has nothing left to give him except truth. And truth, under pressure, is enough to begin with. He does not need the moment to be easy. He needs himself to be under command. That is the quote the desert leaves behind. Fear may enter the car, but it does not get to drive. Most people will never break down alone on Death Valley Road at high noon. But everyone has a desert. A hospital hallway. A late-night kitchen. A silent phone. A bill on the table. A failed engine inside the chest, where the old confidence refuses to start. Your battlefield may not have heat rising off asphalt, but it will have that same metallic click, the moment life says no, and fear asks to take the wheel. When that moment comes, remember the empty water bottle. Let it bring you back to the facts. Let it remind you that shame wastes strength, panic wastes time, and despair is not a commander. Stop. Breathe. Shrink the battle. Choose the next right action. And if this lesson belongs in your life, carry it quietly. A disciplined person is not someone who never feels fear. It is someone who refuses to let fear take command.